awareness is the field of energy and information. It is the mind's faculty for having thought. So really, it's thought before thought is even present. So thought would be putting it into words. So awareness is even before that, is the highest part. Retaining awareness is the mark of not growing old. Giving up in favours of habits, rituals, rigid beliefs and outworn behaviour is the mark of ageing. So don't we know that? You know, when someone gets much more rigid in their mind and their thinking, that as they get to certain age groups, and what they find is that they become giving up in favour of habits, which we've always done it this way. You know, we've all had parents who said the same, I'm sure, as they got older. Rituals, rigid beliefs, and outworn behaviour. And I like the rigid belief because this is what happens to them. They become rigid in their thinking, but they become rigid in their brain. And this is even more interesting because the most common cause of the ageing process in our thinking and our neurological is the ageing brain, which is going rigid. So the question is, why does it go rigid? And the answer is 70% of your brain, dry weight of your brain, that's without the water, is fat. Okay? And of that fat, most of it is unsaturated fat. Okay? Now, everywhere else in the body, the cell membranes are half saturated and half unsaturated. But in the neurological system, in the brain, in the myelin and all the neurons, both phospholipid tails, as they're called, are unsaturates. Okay? Now, say those unsaturates are not optimal fatty acids. They could be in the trans form instead of the cis form, okay, which we'll look at a little bit later. They might be hydrogenated oils from the dreaded shortenings and things in our food. But more important than any of that, and it was interesting because a friend of mine who was a biochemist who used to do the courses 20 years ago, he said, you've forgotten one thing, Chris, the most important thing to do with all fats, much more important than trans fats or hydrogenated, is oxidized fats when they go rancid. And it took me 20 years to think about this. It became a bit slow on the uptake sometimes. But then I realized that Frank was right, that the big thing that we all miss is oxidized or rancid oils. And rancid oils are something which we all eat all the time. Okay? Every day we're taking rancid oils, and that's without us going rancid inside. Okay? And the reason we go rancid inside and outside is due to air, you know, as oxygen attacking the double bonds. It's due to heat when we're warm, and the body is warm because it's 37 degrees, and it's due to light. Now, there's a lot we can do to help light to prevent things, and that's mirror on glass. So we know mirror on glass only allows the UVA to go in, the near part of the UVA, and the near part of the infrared. And when you put that infrared, the two sides of the rainbow together, you get that beautiful mirror on light, okay, or the violet flame as it's called. So we can protect oils by using mirror on glass, okay? But you cannot protect them from oxygen. But there is a way, and you can't protect them from heat, but there is a way, and it's called a fridge. Okay? So what you must do now that the better weather's come, we must be positive about it, is you and your patients must put the oils, because you're buying expensive oils, cold-pressed oils, organic, in the fridge. Okay, this is very important, so that you're going to lower the temperature. Most fridges are set 5 degrees, and it'll slow the aging process down. And what we highly suggest is you put 2 drops of water on the top. So every time you open the bottle, put 2 drops of water on the top. Water will float across the top of the oil, and so air can't get in. Okay, so it'll stay. So look after the oils and look after the main antioxidant, which we'll talk about, in the same way. Okay? So you must look after oils and teach your patients to do that as well. Now, I'm going to, a little later on, show you how you measure whether you've gone rancid. And if you go rancid, this may be the reason for a lot of not just thinking or inability to think with Alzheimer's disease, but a lot of other neurological problems. May well be just the fact that the neurons have gone rancid. Okay? And we're going to look at what is the main protector, the natural protectors to rancidity in the body. Because when we start to affect different parts of the brain, then we react in different ways. And fatty acids are really, really important. And we know that with behavior problems with children. You know, they have this great thing about fish oils are for children. And not only do they learn better, but they actually behave better. And children who are deficient in omega-3 oils can misbehave and be, you know, really difficult children. So we know that the fatty acid metabolism has a profound effect. What we also now know is we wouldn't ever prescribe fish oils because they're all full of mercury and dioxin, and particularly if you've got a child who weakens to blue, because you're just asking for increasing the toxins in that child. And I don't feel right personally about prescribing fish oil to somebody who's not blue, saying, well, actually, you're not blue, but I'm going to give you something that's got mercury in it. You'll be all right, okay? Okay, how could I do that? So, you know, I couldn't morally say that. So the answer is when you get used to doing plenty of other natural sources of omega-3 oils, you know, with the walnut oil, the pumpkin and the flax oils, and the body can convert these quite readily. Okay, so life in action. So in psychoanalytical theory, the unconscious refers to the part of mental function which subjects make themselves unaware of. So it's similar in a way to the subconscious, but we're going to define it as different. So unconscious belongs to the conscious part, so that would be the emotional stress reflexes, whereas the subconscious is the limbic system. So in here, if you can read this in your notes, it's just a little bit about each lobe and dysfunctions as far as thinking. So here we see in the frontal lobe, we got loss of flexibility in thinking, mood changes. So this is a game where our moods and our thinking processes through. This is not where it occurs, it's where it processes through from the non-material into the material or the physical side. So if you got that, yeah, you probably find that very difficult to read. That's why, as Clive said, all this is up on the website. So if you want to, you can go there, take one of those and blow it up yourself. Now, the unconscious. We want to sort of delve into here a little bit. So the unconscious emotions, according to David Hawkins. Now, David was the first person to use muscle testing to evaluate consciousness. So we talked a little bit about consciousness ranging from the higher self in the highest part and to the lowest part. So there's some pretty evil, nasty people around, and there's some pretty holy people. But how holy are those holy people, and how bad is that bad person? And so he designed a graph called an exponential curve, where each point of a scale of 1 to 1,000 was 10 times greater than the previous one. So it means that if you put 1,000 as your top point, 1,000 is 10 times greater than 999, and 999 is 10 times greater than 998. So you can see it goes like that. The biggest jump is the last one, and that's, you could call virtually infinity. Okay? So you set that as your ultimate goal. So if you want absolute truth, and you're going to calibrate something out of 1 to 1,000 for truth, which is what we really want to desire, it has to calibrate at 1,000. If it doesn't calibrate at 1,000, it might be only slightly true. Now, some people don't like this, right? The last pope hated, not muscle testing, but he hated relativism, he called it. Okay? He gave great lectures on relativism, because he considered either something is right or it's wrong. Okay, and that was it. It was very black and white. But I like to know how wrong it is or how right. So if I'm doing a seminar, what I do is I say, when I finish this, I'm going to calibrate this seminar, this presentation, for the people coming on the seminar, because you are very different from the group in Bristol. Okay? We have a lot of Morris dancers, for instance, in Bristol. I don't suppose anybody does Morris dancing here, you see, in the southeast of London, or not so much, let's say. So different areas have different populations, different beliefs, different concepts, different way of life, different style of life altogether. So I like to muscle test, because I found with that one, for you, I put too much information in. Okay? You need it simple in comparison to the Western people. Okay? So what the answer was that there was too much information there, so I cut bits out. Okay? So I calibrate at this one at 900, which is what I did before. So instead of saying, is it 1,000? No, and giving up, so all that work is a waste of time. I calibrated at 900. So I then thought, well, what have I got to do? Do I have to add things for you, or do I subtract? And the answer was subtract. Subtract, subtract, subtract. You know, there's too much information until I get up to 1,000. Okay, so that I like to know how bad it is. So if 1,000 is your target to get to, and you can achieve 1,000 with something, how far are you off? Okay, so some things are disastrous, yes or no. You know, when we do some verbal challenging, like on gifts, skills, and talents, which I'm sure some of you have done with me, you find that either you got the gift or you haven't got the gift. It's very rarely half the gift. You know, either you have got it or you haven't. But very rarely do people come in at 900 with a particular gift, skill, or talent. They either get 1,000 or they're less than 200. Okay? So, but there are some things which you would find relative, and how can you improve it? Now, what David Hawkins was the first person to do this on 1 to 1,000, and what he found is that people who calibrated above 540 out of 1,000 were very enlightened type of people. And these were people who calibrated extremely high in their consciousness, and some of them were living, and many of them were not living, or not in the physicality world as such. And he put this as the point of unconditional love. Okay, unconditional love. So at that point, when you achieve unconditional love, you have love for everybody and everything in your life, and that would include Greeks, Romans, or whatever it might be, okay? So we all have things, well, actually, I like everybody, but not you, you know, whatever. That's not unconditional love. So unconditional love means you're in total harmony with the universe. And that means your left and your right brain are not arguing. You see everything in a lovely way. And that means, from our measurement point of view, there will be no meridian imbalance. Because the meridians are basic reflections of our body energy, which is being processed through our mind. So this person will have no meridian imbalance. Have you ever come across that, Sam? And anyway, you feel their pulses and things. Actually, this person is in total harmony. Hopefully after a treatment, but that's what we try to achieve with the treatment. But occasionally you think, this is a lovely person. And lovely people don't go around telling you, I'm lovely. Because that's their ego talking. Okay, beware of someone who says, I'm a holy person, or I'm enlightened, or whatever, because the chances are they're probably not. And what David Hawkins found is that people who have negative emotions governing their life calibrate below 200. So 540, you're in that unconditional love, in total harmony, okay? If you're below 200, you're within the field of the negative unconscious emotions. And these are things like anger and hate and grief and despair and so on, which we all suffer from time. So we all go down the abyss. And sometimes we can't get out of it because it takes control of us, and we stay there. And that's what generates our negative body functions and our negative thinking in our way. But this is thinking. This is every time we have a thought, an active thought, it's negative. Okay? So you talk to people and they say, oh, nice day today. Yeah, but it's going to rain later on.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, it's the cutbacks, or it's the recession, isn't it? And I say, but hold on, the recession's finished. You know, haven't you listened to the news? The recession is actually, but they've been programmed by the news for so long that we're in recession. Many of the older people still talk about the cutbacks of Mrs. Thatcher. You know, they say, but Mrs. Thatcher hasn't been in government for 20 years. So they still blame Mrs. Thatcher, though, because that's programmed into them. So that's subconscious. But now they should be listening to the news and actually realise we've got a growth period on now, small that it is, but we've actually been out of recession for quite some time. And if we all think and program that in, we will get out of recession a lot quicker, okay? But there's certain people who want to keep you in there, isn't it? Keep you, the press, for instance, and the opposition in the government, opposition in Parliament, will always try and tell you how bad it is, okay? And when that opposition becomes in power, then the other ones do it in the same way. They're very negative oppositions, aren't they? Very rarely are they supportive. But they don't come up with a positive answer to it. You know, they tell you how bad the ideas are, but they don't say, well, we would do it this way because they've had their turn, and so on, vice versa. So these emotions, or unconscious, calibrate below 200, and these are the main things to do with the conscious, which we'll find here, okay, conscious, or we call them unconscious, okay? Remember, subconscious is here, conscious is there, okay? Now, this was the scale of consciousness that David put together. So here we see, with the below the white line here, we see our negative emotions. So we've got pride on top of anger, on top of craving and desire, on top of fear, on top of grief, apathy, guilt. And the bottom of the pile is shame, or low self-esteem. Okay, so these are really bad negative emotions. As we go up, we've got more positive ones above here until we get to this magic point of 540 when we go into unconditional love. And that's the point David makes very clear in his books when we have real healing. So real healing can only occur to us when we heal the mind. Okay, he's talking about healing of the mind. When you heal the mind, what it means is you're in harmony, you're not arguing, and if you're not arguing, you're not creating the changes in your chemistry, and therefore your physicality. So, wow. So we know that unconditional love, therefore, must cure everything. Or you don't worry about it anymore, okay, if you've got unconditional love. So if unconditional love is the answer to all things, why do I not calibrate at 540 and why do I have imbalances in my meridians? What aspect of love am I not seeing in my life? Boom. And the answer is you don't know, do you? No, because it's unconscious. Okay, but there is an aspect, otherwise you would be up there with the gods as such. But most of us are not. But the worrying thing is, what bit is it that's missing? And this is what we need to discover in each other, is what part of us is not there experiencing love and putting the block in as far as achieving unconditional love. So here we've got consciousness, unconscious, subconscious. Another way of putting the into the human personality of what we've already dealt with. Consciousness, unconscious, and consciousness. And all of these, the consciousness, the subconscious, and the higher self must all be in harmony or balance for perfect health. I think we all agree there. That's what we all try to achieve. If you're an osteopath, you try and achieve it within the musculoskeletal system from osteopaths and chiropractors. And if you work on the chemistry, you want all your brain chemicals to be, and your hormones to be in balance. And if you're a psychologist, you want the person's left and right brains. But the answer is that all of these must be in balance for perfect health. So we know that with quantum physics has changed the ideas of how we see the world, and atoms were discovered to be bundles of energy and not solid matter as previously thought. So when you get into an atom itself, there's actually no physical lump there. We just know it's bundles of energy going around so fast that they appear to be lumps. So all three aspects of a state of being should be in harmony. Disharmony would mean there's an imbalance in that person's energy, because if we're ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all energy, and we can measure a person's imbalance in their energy through their meridian system. And we know that chi equates, or with us, we would call it vitality or spirit. So a person's highly got good spirit, or they got lots of vitality. In Indian medicine, they call it prana, or breath, or life itself, you might call. That life spark is the chi, or vital energy. Meridians are energy channels that flow in specific and predictable patterns. And I think everybody in the room is probably familiar to some extent with these flow of energies. And it's very important to know certain points of certain meridians because they are associated with changes of energy in the person, which equates with changes of brain chemistry, which changes, are reflected because of the change of the thinking process, or they themselves create the change. And that's what we want to try and establish. So we can measure meridian imbalances at specific acupuncture points, and the ones I tend to favour are the beginning and ending points on the face or the trunk. Okay? Now there's a little bit more that I've discovered which we'll share regarding their relationship to the left and the right brain, and this is important. Meridian is a wave of energy. Energy is composed of both wavelengths and frequencies. So we can measure energy. We don't know what the hell it is, but we can measure it. And we can measure it as a wavelength. So we know it's waves. And we can measure it as a frequency. So how many times the wave goes up and down is the frequency in a second. And we can measure the wavelength, the distance between them. So there's two ways of measuring energy. And we know that colour is a particular wavelength with the visible light. And we see red, green, blue, etc. So we know that colour is a measurement of wavelength. And sounds, so we can hear sounds within what the human ear can. So again, we get good effects through these, which are in harmony to a person, or disharmony. So two good ways of treating meridian imbalances, and therefore ourselves, is colour therapy and sound with music therapy. So it can be harmonious or it can be non-harmonious. Okay, so let's go back now to the colours. So the constitutional-wise, we know that people have different colours. Now, I need a volunteer who doesn't mind what's going to happen. That's right, you don't have to take your clothes off or anything. You sure? Yeah. It's all right, you can all have a go in a minute, don't worry. So let's do you then. Okay. Can't remember what you are. You're red, aren't you?
I think I'm red.
Yeah, okay. Now, last time we were in Bristol, we were in a very nice hotel, but it was downstairs and the lecture part was off from the window. And just on the other side of the window in the afternoon, there was a wedding going on. So it's very distracting for the people because they're one moment looking at the bride coming in. But we were in the dark, well, relative dark, and it was very difficult to get the colour acetates to work. Okay. One thing you must have when you do the coloured acetates is always have good light. Okay. Very, very important because people will sometimes say in the camera, oh, I always test that green. And then you test them and you test that red and you think, well, why is this? And sometimes it's just the change because you've got yellowish lights here. So we'll get our 3 colours ready. So you pop yourself down on your back there. Now, okay, that's good. Right, so we'll do use the rectus femoris. It doesn't matter which muscle you use, all right, at the moment. You know, I like to use rectus femoris because it's the strongest muscle. Pull up. Okay. We'll do it around the other way, I think, for you. So we'll do blue first. Okay, so you're not blue. Green. You're not going weak on green. So there's only one left, isn't there, unless she doesn't weaken to any colour. So she's weakening to red. Okay. Now, what I do next is I put red over one eye, isn't it, to see if she's red. And the answer is she's red on the right eye. And she's red on the left. So that's good. Okay. Now, she's how tall are you? 5 foot. 5 foot 4. So she's just a little short for a red, isn't she? Usually reds are about 5'5" to 5'7", 5'8". So she's a short red. Yeah. But you remember what you do is you look at the hands and you look at the shape of the hands and the length here. And she's got beautiful long fingers there. Keep them up like that, that's it. Okay. Far too long for a blue, even though she's still a little bit short. She'd come into the blue, possibly, but she's actually a red because she's got long, thin fingers. And which gland is she dominated by if she's red? Thyroid, that's it. So we just make sure that she's in balance, because she could be a blue disguised as a red, okay? A sheep in wolf's clothing. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So remember, we're going to test, don't move. Okay, so we test the right greater wing of the sphenoid. In other words, we're doing the right amygdala for the subconscious to the left. Because people can change their colour through their thinking. And people will always ask this, how is it that, you know, I used to be a red and now I'm a green and so on? And the answer, as you'll come to realise, is because of your thinking. Okay, so she's in harmony. Left to right, right to left is in harmony. All right? So now, I'm not going to challenge her to find out what her consciousness level is out of 1,000. Okay? What we do know is she weakens to red, and therefore there is probably an issue here. Okay, she's not perfect, not above 540 yet. Okay, so we could grade it, but I don't want to do that. That's something you don't do in public. All right. Now, we want to know which brain to sort of talk to you about. Okay, where is her major sort of starting issue here? Okay, and we're going to simply do that because we know that the left leg is operated, both sensory and motor, by predominantly 90% by the right brain. Okay, we're all happy about that. It decussates by about 90%, not totally, but 90%. The right brain is the intuitive brain or creative one. So we're going to get her to hum, but not a hum, not a song that you know. So in the UK, most people, when they're asked to hum, will hum a tune, okay, that they're familiar with. And anybody guess what the tune is they hum most commonly? No, God Save the Queen. Okay. So we have a Frederick who's coming to join us, a new qualified chiropractor, who's from Hamburg, and he said, I don't hum that. God Save the Queen. So the second one is Happy Birthday. Yes, second most common. So you have to remember, so you tell them not to hum a tune, right, which you know. So just like you would hum around the garden. Off you go. Okay, so she's nice and strong to that. So her right brain is functioning. So her left brain is operated by the left, or operates the left side. So the right leg is operated by the left brain, both motor and sensory, pull. And this is the logical pun. So we're going to put her to do some maths. Now, choose your patient well. Don't make it too stiff. You want them to think, and it doesn't matter whether they get it right or wrong, so it's not a test, all right? So 100 back in threes is my favourite. So 100, just because as soon as you hear this, you quake if you're not good on your left brain. And most people in this room will not be left-brained. They will be right-brained, which is why you're here today. Okay, why you're natural medicine practitioners. Okay, so 100 back in threes, so 197. Okay, off you go.
197, 94,
Pull.
91.
Okay, pull. Okay, you passed or failed, whatever. Yeah. Okay, so don't comment and say, no, you got it wrong. Okay, that'll terrify them even more. It doesn't matter. If you've got somebody who's really bad, go back in 10 in twos or something, you know, but don't make it too stiff. But you've got to actually think. What you're looking for is them to switch the switch in their left brain so they're actually thinking about it. Right? So I will use your right leg to do my test with you from now on. All right? So do you want to swap with your head up here so everybody can then see? So what we've established at the moment, Christine is a red, and that's what she really is. So she falls into the characteristics genetically of a red person. So we know that certain enzymes will be expressed well, certain enzymes won't. Immediately in your mind you say, she's probably a bit funny with wheat, she's probably sensitive to aluminium, and all the things associated with, we talked about the biological differences with that. But there's one interesting thing that, what about her thinking process? If thinking changes our physiology and therefore our gene expression, what is actually going on in her thoughts at a very high level? And if she's not in unconditional love, she must be somewhere in conditional love, if you like. And this is probably not something she can answer where her block is, but she would know somewhere inside her subconscious, if you like, when her higher self would know which part is not coming out. And this is really interesting because if you don't experience the love, then you're going to have a block, okay? So that divine energy is not going to come through. But some people don't feel loved, okay? Some people don't feel worthy of love, okay? They don't feel they justified it in any way. And some people don't give enough out, okay? They may give it out in some aspects in their life and not in others. And this is really quite interesting. These are the only three ways, really, you can't have love. Either you don't want it, you don't feel it, or you don't give it, okay? Those are the sort of three aspects there. And the interesting thing with this is it falls in with the colours. So what I'm going to get Christine to do is to say something out loud. Now I'm going to do them in reverse order. Okay, don't do the one that you know their colour is involved with first. Okay, because they won't understand that. So what she's going to say is the last one here, I am loved. Okay, so you say it out loud, not really loud, but
I am loved.
Pull. So she says, I am loved, and she stays strong. Okay, I am loving. I am
loving.
And I am lovable.
I am lovable.
Say it again.
I am lovable.
Okay. Now, I don't know whether you've seen that before. No, you didn't know that. You didn't know what was going to happen because you couldn't see what was on the screen, okay? And that's profound when this happens, really profound, because you think, oh, consciously you can think something different, but unconsciously you don't. And that's what we're really doing. So this is an unconscious, or in kinesiology terms some years ago, we used to use a word called psychological reversal. Stephanie, do you still teach that, psychological reversal? Yeah. So in other words, people who don't really want to get right. They say they want to get right, but they actually don't want to get right. But they don't know they don't want to get right. And when you do the test, they think, oh, because it has such a profound effect, they do two things. Either they then leave you and don't ever come back and see you again, or they understand that they're and they start to make progress. So it depends on whether you want to do this with the patient, because it can have a very profound effect. If you need to pay your mortgage and your rent off, don't ever do this, because you'll lose the patient. Okay? They now know that you know that they don't want to get by it, and so your relationship has changed completely. Okay? But sometimes they will say, oh yes, now I can understand, yeah, I've put a block in there somewhere, haven't I? And you can talk them around it, and you can do the tapping and so on. But at the end of the day, they've got to understand that they are the cause of the problem. When I first went to Russia in 1991, one of the doctors on the course was interested in the psychological reversal phenomena. And next time I went, about a year later, he said, I want to have a work with you, Chris. He said, because, you know, I've taken up what you said about patients not wanting to get better. And he said, I've taken it to another degree. And I said, oh, tell me about it. And he said, I've asked the patient, or challenged the patient, whether they have faith that the doctor can get them better. And he said, you know, 90% of patients say it's a negative answer. They don't believe the doctor could make them better. He said, what do I do if the patient doesn't have faith in the doctor? They're never going to get better, are they? So we need to perhaps sort of think a little bit broader with our own patients, is do they actually have faith that something can be done? Not necessarily from us, but from anybody. Most have already given up because they're told, you've got to go on drugs, this is the only thing. Nothing can be done for your problem. Nothing can be done in relationship to you know, your arthritis. It's going to get worse as you get older. And you'll be in a wheelchair by a certain case. You know, these are stories. They don't seem to say that quite so much because they like chopping bits off and they've got anti-inflammatory medications and so on. So, you know, that threat. But most of our patients and most of us, in time, will go rancid in our brains and we'll probably get osteoarthritis. Okay? Now, some of you may know the work in the 1930s of Pottinger. Pottinger was a pioneer in the nutrition field. Dr. Pottinger, and he kept 1,000 cats. He must have had a cat's home. And he ran experiments with these cats, and some cats he put on their natural diet of raw meat and unpasteurized milk. Some cats he put on pasteurized milk and raw meat, some he put on cooked meat and unpasteurized milk, and the other 250 got pasteurized milk and cooked meat. Okay? And at the end of several months, the ones who had the cooked meat and the pasteurized milk couldn't even make it to the door of the cage to get fed. They died because they were unable to move. And on autopsy on there, they were riddled with osteoarthritis, absolutely riddled with osteoarthritis. Their joints had all gone to bits, which animals don't ever get osteoarthritis normally. Okay? They had liver problems, they had heart disease, hardening of the arteries, you name it, every part of their body had deteriorated. But the most impressive was their joints, that they couldn't drag themselves to the front of the cage anymore. Those who had half and half were in better state of health, and those who had both were perfect in their normal lifestyle and never got osteoarthritis. Okay? So Pottinger came to the conclusion that eating cooked food and pasteurized milk was the cause of degeneration in the joints. And he's being proved right. You know, it takes 80 years sometimes for this, and more people are coming to realize that you should eat half of your diet should be raw. Okay, this is the first thing. The second part of it is, what is it that happens when you heat? Now, we know lots of things happen with raw milk to pasteurize it. It changes phosphatase. Phosphatase is an enzyme that's destroyed, and this creates an imbalance in the phosphorus and the calcium levels in the body, okay? And you end up actually not getting enough calcium by having pasteurized milk. And this has been around for some 30 or 40 years, that the more milk people drink, the less calcium they get and the more they pee it out because there's lack of phosphatase. But the cooking of protein is very interesting because he came to the conclusion that the animals were protein deficient, even though they were eating cooked meat. Okay? Because an animal normally makes it from raw meat, okay, and has all the enzymes and things in there. That's their normal diet. Okay? So he started studying this, and they found that most people who got degenerative joint disease were actually protein deficient. Yes, they might have problems with zinc and magnesium and so on, but the most is the protein. Okay, protein deficiency. And that protein is really, really important, because if protein is heated with the presence of sugar of any form, particularly glucose, it glycosylates or joins in it, and the body then can't use that as an amino acid to build proteins. And in fact, it will build antibodies against it. Okay? And the 3 amino acids that does it is tryptophan, lysine, and methionine. So those 3 amino acids are really vital amino acids in the body, and those 3 will glycosylate in the presence of sugar or glucose. Okay? So every time you cook something which has got any form of glucose in it, you'll get glycosylated proteins or amino acids, which are useless for the body to rebuild, which is why Pottinger's cats all fell apart. Okay, as soon as he put them back onto raw meat, they started to recover, but sometimes it took the next generation, and even the generation after that, before they came back to full health. Okay? So the cause of osteoarthritis and problems is, yes, look at their calcium, look at their magnesium, etc., but look at their proteins. Now, the one that interests me in relationship to today is tryptophan, because tryptophan is the source of serotonin. Okay? Now, tyrosine is another one because this is the source of dopamine, which is an upper for people, and serotonin is one which levels us off in our mood. And many people are tryptophan deficient, even though they're eating a lot of food, a lot of meat and fish, but they don't get the protein from it. Okay? So they're not getting it. So surprise, surprise, the richest source of amino acids, okay, in the system are probably not what you're going to think about. Okay? And these you can have raw. Okay? Now, number 1, top of the charts, is potato. Now, you say, no, rubbish, Chris, you're talking rubbish. Potato contains 10% protein, okay? 90% starch. Okay? So you're not going to eat the potato. You're going to juice it. Okay? So you run it through a juicer, and you drink the juice. And that juice contains, that's almost pure protein. Okay? So you will run through, on average, most people would test to about 2 to 3 potatoes. So a medium-sized potato, about that size, 3 of those. Wash them, get organic ones, obviously. And if you're a green person like I am, make sure you don't get green potatoes. Okay? All right? So I haven't yet found anybody who's green who weakens to the juice. Okay? So you run it through the juicer. Now it goes off very quickly. And the reason is, surprise, surprise, potatoes are a very rich source of vitamin C. But it's just under the skin. Okay? So what do you do when you eat potatoes? You peel them, and then you lost the vitamin C, and then they go black. And you'll find the juice will go black quite quickly. Okay? So what do? You add into that a quarter or half of lemon. Okay? Now the lemon will give you the vitamin C, and it'll also give you the third component, which is the bioflavonoids. So that stops it from going off, and it gives you a complex, which I'll talk about a bit later, which is very rich in vitamin C and very rich in bioflavonoids, or vitamin P as it's called, and a very critical enzyme to the production of dopamine. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is sesame seed. Sesame seed is what in the Middle East they use a lot. And apparently the Turks, during the First World War, when they were caught prisoner, all survived the prison camps that we locked them up in, whereas most others, the Germans, all died, and other people died. And they put it down to the fact they were so full of protein with their sesame. So they use it as tahini and other ways. So you can have sesame seed, but you don't roast them or cook them, okay? You can, again, put them through a machine, soak them in any way you want. And the third one was found by fattening pigs up. Now, if you want to fatten pigs up, you give them wheat. If you want to make them lean or muscular, you give them rye. Rye is the finest source of all the grains as far as protein is concerned. So again, not cooked, but cracked up, eaten fresh, or soaked. Okay, soak it overnight, rye. If you want to make muscle, and you know, I've done a lot of teaching over the years now, 21 years I think, in Russia, and they're strong, I can tell you. Russians are strong people, you know. Never, I learnt my lesson, never do an arm wrestle with a Russian. They're strong, and they eat rye. Okay, so bear that in mind. So eating rye, sesame seeds, and potato juice. Okay, you have a glass of potato juice with half a lemon in there each day, and you'll be. Most people, it really shows up twice a day, breakfast and dinner. Okay, one patient who's a retired building manager, he said he was very impressed when I did it for him. He said, "This is really good." He said, "I like this." And he said it'd be nicer with a vodka in the evening. Which is what Russians, that's how they make it from the potato anyway. So what are we going to do with you? Okay, if subconsciously you don't feel lovable, and that's really what the rest of the day is about. So what we've got to remember is here we're going to work off the left brain, and we're going to bring her out periodically and keep working with the left brain. Fix the left brain up, and then we'll move to the right brain. Okay, off you go, and we'll see. Now, if you're a green, you will weaken to the I am loving, which is the giving out part. You subconsciously don't feel that you give out. So I am lovable means really that you don't feel worthy of love. You don't feel that you deserve love. I am loving means that you're giving it out. You don't feel that you're giving it out. And the blue is I am loved. They don't feel loved, which is why very often a cancer develops, as we talked in the last seminar, 1 to 2 years after a stress. So you go through a divorce, a bereavement, something like that. 1 to 2 years later, the woman develops a breast cancer or the man a prostate cancer, and because they don't feel loved anymore. And this equates, interestingly, with the blue person with a low level of oxytocin, which is the hormone associated with love. It does not give you love. You can't have love by taking oxytocin, but you can develop oxytocin by feeling loved. Now, if you're low in oxytocin as a result of not feeling worthy, not feeling loved, you go high. If you go down in one hormone, you'll always go up in another because it's a seesaw game. And the one you go high in is corticotrophic releasing hormone, which stimulates ultimately the corticotrophic, the steroid hormones. So you're going through not feeling loved, and you get high stress. Stress results there. Okay, so you get a lowered immune system as a result, and decrease in your natural killer and other T lymphocytes. So in other words, your immune system is ready to pick something up, or if it develops an abnormality in the system for some reason or another, your own immune system can't get in there. And I find that since doing the cancer seminars, there's several of them, that, and going around that checklist, do you remember that checklist around, from methylation, apoptosis and so on, that the most common thing that comes up with people is the immune system. So with hormone-dependent cancers, it's usually conception vessel comes up because that relates to the steroid hormones here on the one side, and the spleen. Spleen is always associated with the immune system, okay? And the most common reaction to the spleen is, it means there's a lack of immune system. And that's going, with a blue person, you can see how it's sort of developing, that their immune system is unable to get hold or recognize the cancer cell, and you need to spice that up, okay? And one of the best things we found, for doing that was things like silver with thiamine, zinc, vitamin C, etc., which I'll talk about later. Okay, so in the case of Christine, what you find here is you get a low thyroid function. Okay, you remember reds won't operate by the thyroid. They get low thyroid releasing hormone, and they get high gonadotrophic hormone releasing hormone. Okay, and that slows their metabolism down because they feel they're not worthy of love, and the more they feel unconsciously, remember, not worthy of love, the bigger they get, the slower their metabolism becomes. Okay? And then the green is I am loving, and they weaken to that. It reflects as low levels of endorphins. And all these brain chemicals are in the boxes there, in the neurochemistry boxes there, and the hormone boxes. So there's not too much joy in life. Sorry, greens. But it's unconscious. You enjoy your life, but behind the scenes there, you don't feel as if you sort of give out enough. Low endorphins, and you get high thyroid releasing hormone. And we know that the ultimate answer is you burn your adrenals out, because we have to prove and justify that we are loving all the time. So we're fighting it, and so we work. And that eventually burns us out, doesn't it? Okay. So we need, for adrenals, we need our vitamins and so on, but we also need the proteins, okay? So probably amazingly, if you take the lesson from Pottinger, remember Pottinger's cat, is the major deficiency that most people have is protein, okay? And yes, add your vitamins and minerals, but what they've found in years gone by is a lot of times they use glandular tissue supports, okay? Because the glandular extract will give you the protein for the gland, okay? But you can't eat that. You get an allergic reaction if you had that into your blood. So what happens is you swallow it, your digestive juices will chop those proteins up into the amino acids with the right sequence of the amino acids for building your adrenal glands, all right? But you've got to get those in. This is why they must be cold. If you have you mustn't have a heat extracted. You can't go and cook the chicken and eat the adrenals from it, all right? That wouldn't be the same. But you could eat the adrenals raw, probably get salmonella, and you get all the bad fats and so on. But with the defatted, if you like, adrenal tissue extract and other tissue extracts can be very effective. But it's not the actual adrenal extract that you can't take that in. You have to rebuild your own proteins in your own body. But if you give them the amino acids in the right sort of balance, then they can rebuild and you're likely to get your adrenals back. But there's a quicker way of doing that, isn't there? Okay? What's the quicker way of doing it? Drink potato juice. Okay? Drink potato juice. Have rye or wheat or good grains in there, and sesame seeds. Okay? Now, there's a host of other things are there, but you're going to learn a little bit about the fats and oils later on because this has a profound effect upon our brain chemistry and therefore on our thinking.